Hi.
Oh, hello again.
Yes, have to stop meeting like this.
How's the weather with you?
Well, I've just been out for a very quick walk. Very, very cold, very windy, which makes it seem even colder. A lot, not very much snow. Some snow still hanging around because it hasn't been warm enough to melt for ages. A lot of quite thick ice everywhere, but a bit of blue sky at the moment, so
Yeah.
not too bad.
Beautifully sunny here, and it must have got just above zero because there was a few drips of what I think must have been rain when I was
Oh,
out
okay.
walk. So it's
Yeah.
mainly just a blue sunny sky, but we've not had really much wind at all because one of the nice things is that there are all these trees with piles of snow and snow gradually melting off them in beautiful sorts of ways. And if there'd been anything much of a wind, it would have got
Would have brought it off, yeah.
wiggled, shaken off. But
Yeah, no, it's been we've had quite a bit of wind, and where I am on the side of a hill, I think it tends to sort of whistle round it a bit, so it's usually a bit of a windy spot here. Anyway, so what do we need to chase? I was wondering, I mean, if Kira's not going to send out that letter, we could just well, at least you could, because you've got the list and you're good at linking letters to your Excel spreadsheet.
Yes.
We could just send it out ourselves. We don't really need to.
She's not sent it.
No, I sent it to you and her last night.
Yeah.
With the idea that, I mean, she was saying she would send it to Megan, but Megan's on leave this week, and it was what's his name? Can't think for a minute, but you know who I mean. Sending them out. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, okay. We're just catching up on admin while there was nobody else.
No problem. Please carry on. That's fine.
So we could, if it doesn't go out this afternoon, we could. I mean, maybe Kira's waiting for Megan to be back on Monday, but there's no reason why you shouldn't just send it out today. I mean, I think the sooner that people get notice of deadlines and things, the better, really. Sort of concentrates minds a bit, doesn't it?
Yes, I suppose I feel the list of people should be pruned a little. I mean, I've got the spreadsheet with everyone involved in all the challenges.
But that's everybody who's on the...
Which is about 80 or 90 people.
Yeah, it's too many, isn't it?
There are probably 20 or 30 there who really haven't been involved at all in drafting.
Yeah.
Maybe I have to go through a bit.
Yeah, and I think actually, if you do that, or we do it between us, then we could use that same list for sending out a notice about the vaccination sessions.
Yeah.
Because Kira doesn't want to send it out to, the whole Newton mailing list. I mean, the IDP mailing list, because it's got lots of people on who haven't been involved and probably don't.
Yeah, sure. No, the whole IDP mailing list was over 200, I think.
Exactly. So if we've got a fairly concentrated list, it would be useful for that too.
Yeah.
Anyway, apologies, people, while we're just sort of catching up while we wait for Miriam, I guess.
Just whilst we're, I don't know, thinking about doing whatever, can someone talk me through the structure of the Dropbox? Is there one working document, or is it purposefully sort of split off into different sections to stop?
It's purposely split off into different sections so that different people or small groups of people could work on them,
Okay.
you know, with separately. At some point, we'll have to put it all back together to make sure that it sort of coheres, which I'm sure it won't. I mean, none of the others do, so it's unlikely this, you know, I mean, at the moment we've got papers that are written by committee and we need to sort of smooth the cracks over a bit.
Yeah.
But there's I'm just trying to look and see which document it is, that the overall.
So I can see an overall
just
sort of bullet
the-
pointed structure.
You just referring to the interventions.
Yes, just this
folder.
drop box I was looking at. So the challenges for modelling interventions 1, which is dated 23/12 in the title. I think that was Miriam's overall arching plan
Gotcha.
of what's where.
So if I'm, for example, I'm taking on the health economics number 7, I should make a separate document for number 7.
That would be good if there isn't one there already, Matthew. Yes.
Yeah.
And how many words do I have?
Well, okay, so that gets back to this document that Dennis and I were just talking about sending round. We're thinking of about 5,000, 4,000 to 5,000 for the whole paper. So I don't know. So if we've got 6, 7 sections, that's, I don't know,
500.
700,
Yeah.
700 words. Not huge. You know, we're not thinking of a page or two for a section.
Yeah, no, understood.
And very much we're not trying to review the field. We'll just give as much context as we need to be able to describe the challenge. So it, you know, they should all be fairly short to write.
Yeah.
I don't know if it works out quite like that, but sometimes it's easier to write more and just do a sort of dump of everything.
But I think the idea of the previous challenges things was they were perhaps rather sharper and perhaps easier to fit into this ideal. But the ideal was that you were trying to just set a well-focused challenge, and you really ought to be able to do that in half a page or a page, and with a paragraph to explain the context, and then a paragraph to state the challenge with and maybe a few closing remarks on some possible avenues or towards it or something like that. I think in this time round, certainly in some of the papers, people are coming up with rather more diffuse things. So you have a sort of more like a challenge topic in which you might have paragraphs, each of several of which at least contained separate challenges. So
Related issues.
So that's why, I mean, we thought that probably the typical paper here would be a bit longer than last time. I mean, last time there was a word limit of 3,000. So we thought if we suggested 4,000 or 5,000, and maybe in 1 or 2 cases, I'm thinking particularly of modelling and estimation that seem to have a lot of things to cover. So I don't know if it's, well, I mean, if it's necessary for interventions, it is, but I mean, it's we have split off vaccinations as a separate paper. So,
I mean, ideally, we do want them to be sort of fairly tightly focused, and therefore relatively short. On the other hand, it's an open access online journal, so word limits are not as constrained as they would be in paper. So I think the to some extent it's what we're trying to achieve rather than more than the journal imposing them. But I mean, we have agreed these limits as a sort of target as to what we're aiming for.
No, I think the economics, I was specifically looking at this section number 7, the economics looks like it's summarizable and set some interesting challenges in 500 words or so. I don't think I need as much as the model fitting and Liz's complicated modeling techniques, I think. Yeah.
I think I'm one of those people that brain dumps a lot on the page and have to cut down a lot, I'm afraid. So because I'm partway through that process, it's a bit long.
Well, I mean, but that's fine. And I think a lot of them start off like that. And also then you find that because we're writing separate people, writing separate sections, you know, part of that brain dump is common, and one has to sort of decide exactly which section it's going in. And maybe it doesn't need to be in both places and so on. So,
Yeah.
Or what we found with some of it is that, you know, people write a bit of what they write in a particular section. Actually, the beginning of it fits better in the overall introduction to the paper than into that section. So, you know, that sort of creams off bits. But I think we felt with all of this, the main thing was to get stuff down and then worry about, you know, cutting it back and sort of sorting it out afterwards. And once we're sure we've captured all the points that we want to make. Welcome, Daniel. So you haven't met, well, you've met the people who you met yesterday, but you haven't met everybody here, I think. So perhaps at the risk of getting you to say the same thing twice, you might introduce yourself to Miriam and Matthew and Elizabeth at least.
So hi, thanks, Valerie. I'm Daniel Vilela. I am a researcher here in Brazil, working on mathematical modeling, a lot of work that I have done in the past on arboviruses infections, and also malaria, so looking at the interventions of malaria. But lately, a lot of work on the on COVID-19 cases. So I just joined this effort. So I was in the meeting yesterday. I know that you are already working on a lot of this stuff. I want to contribute as best as possible. I don't want to interrupt or anything. I had to leave another meeting and then come here, so I was a few minutes late. So I'm sorry about that.
Well, welcome. It's always nice to have more hands on deck who can do some writing.
Okay. Well, we're grateful to Claudio for suggesting to Daniel that he gets involved. So that's really good. As you say, having an extra pair of hands is very welcome.
So if you work with Claudia, you're probably also involved in the vaccination paper?
Not yet, I think.
Okay.
Possibly.
Yeah, not yet, but I've been working on the past few years with Claudio on several topics. So yeah, okay.
Okay, so I've tried to write up a little introduction. So it's not that much yet, but at least something on paper.
Is that 4.1? Oh yes,
4.1.
Yes, 4.1. Yeah.
And I know that Jasmina and Ghana together are or have already written some text for 4.2. So we are slowly starting to get some text for most of the sections. So my idea was that we just keep on maybe writing everybody on their section, and then in the course of the week, I will put it all together into one document so that we have a first impression of how it's coming together. Because I think that is also then again a motivation, or makes it more clear for everybody where we are actually going.
Do we have a 4.4? I'm not sure. I can't remember what 4.4 was meant to be.
Medical interventions or vaccination.
Oh yeah, that's.
Oh yeah. Okay, so that was going to be rather short because.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was just looking at the. 4.2, 4.3. Yep.
Yeah, let me open the outline. Yeah, and then for point 3, the theoretical framework, that's of course very, let's say, extended. Maybe we have to find some kind of points, let's say a few points that we want to make, I think, because we can't really develop a whole theoretical framework here. It's really, that's what I found while writing. You really have to get your focus onto, not trying to, let's say, describe everything that there is, but to really think about, well, what can't we do yet now? So where are the problems that still have to be solved? Because otherwise it really gets like too long and more descriptive. So that's not what it should be. We really want to focus on where are the open problems for the coming 10 years, basically.
Yeah.
And what I've written now in the introduction is that the tools that we have work quite well on the level of the populations of, if you want to, let's say, model the impact of universal vaccination against something, you can use compartmental modeling quite well, or some form of differential equations. On the other hand, if we really want to model something that is very detailed, there is micro simulations, so agent-based modeling. But let's say my experience with this COVID-19 was actually that what we really want to know is what happens in between, let's say, in between the individual level and the population level. So what happens what's the impact of contact patterns or changes there in smaller population groups, or certain structures that you can't catch really with differential equations, but you also can't, or it's very hard to model them with agent-based models, because then you have to put in all these details about whatever school structures, workplaces, and traveling and everything. So that makes these models extremely complicated, while still not really generating a lot of insight into why something works or not. So I don't know whether people here agree with this kind of idea that I put out in the introduction. I mean, if you do, then I can work it out in some more detail maybe, and that could maybe serve a bit as an like umbrella under which the challenges in the different subsections could fall. Well, maybe that's also a bit my bias, because I see, or I'm interested in these and ways to model various types of social distancing. Like, well, there are so many ideas about what you can do, like creating these bubbles of families, or also questions like what's the impact of certain types of events where people meet in groups of various sizes. What's the impact of school closure and reopening? All these questions have to do with like groups of people in certain sizes. But also, of course, overlapping groups, because everybody's part of a household, but also part of a working place and part of something else. So it's an incredibly complicated structure. And somehow we need some ways to describe this, or let's say model it mathematically, where we still can get some insight into why things happen or why things work.
I can maybe elaborate on that, Miriam. I think that's really interesting, because we've been chatting to the Pakistan Ministry of Health about vaccination scenarios and non-pharmaceutical interventions. Their triggers for for lockdowns, or smart lockdowns as they call it, are number of cases within an industry sector. And also one of their policy responses is banning mass participation events, large areas of worship. Like none of those things are in our model, right? We've got this nice big
No, exactly. Yeah.
But it's also very,
Yeah.
it's
like
not responsive to the
various
pathogen.
measures during the lockdown, like closing all bars and restaurants. I mean, that's a very specific type of measure that everybody understands. It's easy to implement, but we have no idea what really the impact is.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to put that into a model.
And they're very blunt instruments, right? We know that COVID, a large number of cases come from a small number of super spreading events because of the coefficient of clustering is different. So it depends on the pathogen and the transmission dynamic.
Yeah, of course.
Too,
yeah.
which is something I hadn't appreciated before 10 months ago.
So that's basically what I thought should come in section 3, challenges of the theoretical framework, like what characteristics of a pathogen or an infection are, let's say, the key quantities that determine whether an intervention works. Like for contact tracing, it's let's say how long certain steps take. And for lockdown, as you say, it's partly the distribution of contacts in the population and how many people have, let's say, large numbers of contacts and so on. So and how that works together, that also differs per infection. So I think this theoretical framework should somehow say something about it, let's say, that can be used in a future pandemic, so that we know, okay, if a disease has these and these characteristics, this is what we have to pay attention to, or this intervention is going to work well and another one is going to work less good. That's what my idea is about section 3. Yeah, and then about the health economic aspect, that's not, I'm not really my expertise in that is not good enough to really be able to formulate what are the challenges there. So let's say, there are of course lots of health economic methods and modeling types. Can they deal with all of these things, or is there also like the need to develop something new?
So I guess maybe I could share a couple of initial thoughts I had on that then, because it kind of lines up with how we've just discussed about the limitations of compartmental models in dealing with these more complex dynamics within a population. In cost benefit analyses, we've never really had to consider one of our policy options as being a total lockdown and impact on the macroeconomic impact. So I think there's been some really nice work during this pandemic linking macroeconomic modeling and infectious disease modeling, which I think is something to consider if we're now entering a world where non-pharmaceutical interventions are important for emerging pathogens. In a way, we hadn't modeled a lockdown before last March, right?
Yeah. But what do you exactly mean with macroeconomic modeling?
So shutting down, should we shut down sectors of the economy?
Okay, so it's really modeling actually how the economy works and what happens if you take out a part of it.
Yeah, exactly. And effect on, ultimately it plugs into an effect on GDP, but below that you can look at sectoral.
Okay. Yeah, I have no idea how to model that, but you probably know more about it.
I don't, but I know some people who do.
My only experience with health economic modeling is like cost effectiveness analyses. And that's, of course, a very specific type of model. So what you say, that really to model how actually the economy reacts to certain interventions, that's a completely different question. And yeah, very
Yeah.
interesting if you can.
I could do it in 200 words. Yeah, they've been two worlds apart, you know, and they've just come together. I mean, they came together a bit in TB in the last couple of years,
Mhm.
in low income settings, but particularly in the last. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I think the constraints point is really interesting about not just economic constraints in terms of budget, but we've seen health workforce constraints, specifically intensive care nurses in the UK and other, you know, areas of constrained human resources in a health system. Which again, it's been this kind of slow building area in optimizing a model or a cost benefit analysis based on constraints recently, but it's something that's become really important, that kind of operational planning within this pandemic has been highlighted more.
You mean constraints of, for example, that there are not enough healthcare workers, or yeah. I mean, it also works the other way around. These lockdowns are, in a sense, constrained by the fact that you can't. I mean, there have to be the processes continuing in society, so you can't let everybody work at home. I mean, there have to be people that work out of their homes and that meet and have contact with each other. So that also kind of limits the impact that a lockdown can have.
Yeah, absolutely. And that then links into point number 3. What a lovely bridge, because that goes into equity, right? That the people who are most likely to not be able to work from home also have the most contacts, and, you know, the economic and the health risks correlate.
Yeah. Yeah, equity is, of course, a big problem with the whole thing, I guess. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of such a big problem that it's not, let's say, you can write a whole book about it, I guess.
You've got a page.
Yeah, Valerie says it out of space.
So if I can ask anything, it's so what's the structure here? Is first this theoretical framework, and then the several topics to be covered about the interventions, and then from what my perception is, it's a very broad. You have an objective here that's very broad, because you're covering even economic metrics and things like that. Is that right?
Yeah, so what we're discussing, we have an outline for this chapter, which you maybe haven't seen. So what we mentioned, these sections are the different sections of this outline. And for every section, the idea is to formulate a few challenges that occur in this area, and then with specifically, let's say, in the context of interventions. So everything is about interventions, but then interventions looked at from different perspectives, like what are data challenges, and what are, and then we also distinguish between pharmaceutical interventions and non-pharmaceutical interventions. And now this point with the health economics, that's the last section of the whole thing. And then, yeah, general conclusions, which we haven't yet at all discussed.
What about the metrics for evaluating the interventions, the theoretical framework?
You mean like indicators for whether an intervention works or not? Or,
yes.
Yeah, that is, let me see. Yeah, I don't know where that fits probably best into the sections on, so the 2 sections on the challenges. Because, yeah, somehow you have these interventions, and basically the aim of modeling is either to predict, let's say before you implement an intervention, to predict what's the impact going to be, or afterwards to somehow help to evaluate what the impact has been.
Right.
Is that what you mean?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about this second point, but yeah, the first is also valid. Yes.
But there's also a section that's called challenges in parameter estimation and model fitting, and there, at least in the outline, we have mentioned indicators of intervention success. So, for example, now what is used a lot is the effective reproduction number estimated from data that's collected on a daily basis. But yeah, that gives, of course, only a very limited picture of the impact of interventions. And so the question is, what other indicators could be used during the pandemic to see whether actually the lockdown or other interventions work?
The other issue there as well is potentially the lag in time between when the intervention is introduced and when it actually starts to have an impact, and how you go about estimating that, particularly if you're introducing different interventions at different times. It's hard to kind of indicate what time it's actually impacting, which may not be the time that it's actually kind of switched on.
Yeah, and then the disentangling of behavior that results from the intervention and a behavioral response that isn't necessarily dependent on the policy, but yeah, and which means you might have a different effect over time or across different places of what seems like the same intervention. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's very hard to disentangle, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose it's a call for data, right? To parameterize those separate aspects.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to, I mean, with some things, I think we still have to see where it fits best. So it could be that you start writing about something in one section and then we decide to shift it to a different section at some point, but that's not really a problem. I mean, as long as we first get some text on these points, or maybe we don't also have to write about all the points that are in this outline. Maybe some turn out to be less interesting or less important. I mean, we don't have to be exhaustive. I think it's more that we should try to find the interesting challenges and write about those. But I think, yeah, definitely this point about how do we actually evaluate the impact or the success of an intervention and what kind of indicators can be used. I think that's an important and interesting challenge.
Yeah, I think so.
So Daniel, do you have already access to the Dropbox that you can
Yes,
look?
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at the files
Yeah.
now. So
you could look at the text or the sections and see whether, yeah, which one interests you or where you think you could contribute something, and then you can just sign up or
okay.
contact the people who have already started writing something and add something to it. It's very open, so we are happy with everybody who can do something.
Okay, sure.
The overall thing is I think is the document that Miriam wrote entitled Outline 23rd December. And I think that's the one that's got the overall structure with the various sections. in
Yeah,
it.
right.
And then there are individual files for, well, I'm not sure whether all, but almost all of the various sections.
The 23rd December.
Yeah, that's not the actual, it's in the title. It says outline 23rd December. It's the latest version is not last modified on the 23rd of December, but it's that file with that one in the title.
Oh.
It's last modified about 2 minutes ago by me, I think.
Somebody keeps being at it. Every time I look at it, it says you're not looking at the latest version. Hmm. And probably it would be helpful if we slightly renamed the titles of some of the sections to put the 4 point whatever in the title. Some of them have got them and some haven't.
Yeah.
It's sort of slightly easier when you're looking down the drop box to pick out.
At the beginning of the title.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm afraid I've got to get on another call. But am I okay to block out my section this week and then come back
Yeah,
and we discuss it next Friday?
sounds great.
And then-
Yeah. I will try before the meeting as next Friday to make let's say, to compile a text that contains everything that has been written up to then.
So do you want to set a deadline for when people should try and get their sections stable by, so like Wednesday or something?
Yeah, I think Thursday is enough. I mean, it's like only
Okay.
copy and paste work. That's not that,
Yeah.
that doesn't take that
Okay.
long.
Yeah, okay.
It also means it gives people time to read each other's bits either before or after you put them together. So if people maybe could try to get finished by the end of next Wednesday, then Miriam can put them in one document on Thursday and all be in good shape for next week's discussion.
Yeah.
That's the target. Okay, I'm going to sign off. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Matthew.
Cheers.
Okay.
Miriam, hi, this is Jasmina.
Hi.
Just to say,
Hi.
hi, I was late. I was being quiet and sitting in the back row as I came in late. But just to say, do you want? So Ghana and I are going to talk about the interventions and probably change this part a little bit. Should we also, while we talk about the other aspects and try to give our joint view on that, or would you not rather we did that?
Yeah, I mean, the other, right now, every section is like assigned to somebody. So there are other people writing these texts. So maybe you can then, if you have specific suggestions or comments, just email or contact the people who are working on that text, or if they put it up in the Dropbox, you can also just add suggestions into the text.
Okay, yeah, that's what I just wanted to check, but in fact focus on our section still for next week.
Yeah, I mean, I just said before you came that my aim is for next week to then put together all the text that we have by that time, let's say maybe by Wednesday, the text we have for all the sections, put it into one document so that we kind of get an idea of where it's going to and what, and we see what everybody has been writing. And then we can, next Friday, we can discuss it more in a focused way and see how to go from there. So that was my plan.
I'm happy with that plan. I will just listen in now.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to finish tidying ours up, but we'll do that. Yeah, for Thursday next week, for Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay, very
Yeah.
good.
Helena couldn't come just now, but she's also working on that section.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
4.5, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Matthew's gone now. I don't know if it's relevant, but I got the impression from hearing various economists talk in another section that one of the things about some of these economic models is that they are able to take account of behavior changes and feedback as a result of policy. And I mean, that seems very relevant to us in terms of interventions. So I don't know whether that comes in his section on the health economic part or in yours.
Yeah, we sort of brought that up. So, but I don't know much about economic modeling. So maybe I could have a chat with Matt and see.
I know nothing
just
about
see
it.
if there's because I think there's also, because we're also wanting to talk about basically inequities and clustering of peoples who are more or less able to take up and adhere to interventions.
Yeah.
And the dynamics associated with that over time, which relates to seeing that from an an inequities point of view. So I think there might be some bits that are related between the two sections. Yeah. So we can either talk about it all together next week or
yeah, or you just write it as you want to write it, and then at the end we have to see how to shorten it or where in which section it fits best. I mean, it's also good to have these kind of links between the sections. That you can say, okay, this and this is important, and it's explained in more detail in section such and such.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, in your section, I think it's important to underline this heterogeneity and people clustering. And then in the economic section, it's more, let's say, the perspective is more the economic implications of that. So some people may be having much more economic problems from a lockdown than other parts of society.
Yeah.
These kind of, which is also in heterogeneity, but in a different way. You understand how I mean? So it's a topic that is relevant for both sections, but and yeah, you can kind of link to the other section.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That sort of clustering question, I thought it was interesting the way that you were framing trying to find the right level between the whole population and individuals, because it's kind of something that we've been trying to work out as well as we're trying to move from contact tracing models that are more appropriate for early on in an epidemic to later on, and thinking about the degree of complexity that we need to be including and what kind of clustering is important to be representing. Yeah, so that's something.
That's a very
I'll try and look at that section with that in mind, because I think that's an interesting.
Yeah, that's exactly that fits
framing.
exactly. I think
you're thinking about clustering of behavior.
Well,
presumably, or at least a mix of behavior
it's
and
a mix of behavior and contact.
Yeah.
Contacts, how people's contacts cluster, and whether we best represent that. In a network model, we could have, for instance, the way that we've been modeling social distancing sort of as a background to the contact tracing in our model is just to scale the whole, the percentage of, or the average number of outside household contacts, but I don't think, and so you don't see a different effect of contact tracing depending on the level of social distancing that you model. But I think that's probably not right in practice. And in practice, the people that remain after you have lockdown strategies are people who are probably relatively high degree, because those are the people who are still working outside the home, and then they're all connected to each other, but then still thinking about household structures. And so whether we want to include settings or whether we want to have some kind of degree assortativity, and the most simple way we can model the right level of complexity is something that we're kind of struggling with at the moment.
Yeah, that's a very good example. So that's exactly one of the challenges.
I guess I was also thinking about clustering in compliance. A sort of the behavioral.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the extent to which the social influence network, as you might think about it, overlaps with the potential transmission network, and the extent that it doesn't, because I used to be sort of interested in behavior over networks, and those might be the same social ties as you have social contacts, but they might not. And especially, I mean, people starting to look more at sort of online, people's online media affiliations, those networks might not cluster or may or may not cluster geographically, and may or may not overlay the potential transmission network in ways that's sort of interesting to think through. Yeah, but I think sometimes you'll have clustering in compliance because, a whole area might be relatively deprived. And so more people in that area are all having to work outside the home, or find it difficult to isolate and therefore don't get tested, or it might be that, people influence each other who know each other and in a kind of more normative way. So you might imagine different kinds of clustering. I don't have immediate solutions for these things.
I think one of the things about these papers is that we don't have to have solutions.
That's good.
We have simply to be able to point out that there are challenges here, and it would be great if somebody, had a research project on this over the next few years.
Yes.
That's exactly, I mean, if you have a solution, you don't have to write it up in the paper, because then you've already done it.
Yeah.
So put all your open problems into the paper.
Okay. It'll be cathartic.
Okay, is there anything else that we should discuss now?
We ask Daniel, are there particular aspects that you think are most interesting to you that you might like to help with?
Sorry, I was taking a look here in the outline. Well, for now, I'm maybe the theoretical framework. We could try to contribute something there. It's, who's leading that part? Is
I think Robin, mainly Robin Thompson, is doing that, or at least a part of it. Maybe if he's not here today, but I can put you into contact with him via email, that you can maybe discuss with him what I mean. He will be happy if somebody joins, I guess.
Yes, I mean, this paper, or this section in the Dropbox, is dated the 18th of December. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe you do, Miriam, whether it's got any further since then. But that's, a couple of months ago. So
yeah, okay, but he did email me yesterday with a question that whether he should just choose a certain challenge to write about. So I think, Ben, aren't you also somehow involved in this?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm also on that one.
So do you know what the state of the section is, or did you have contact with Robin about it?
No, not yet. I've not heard from Robin.
Yes, I didn't know Ben was involved in this one.
Yeah, that's maybe not on this document.
No, it's not, or at least not on the one I'm looking at, which might be the wrong one.
So I think I expressed a vague interest at the start, but I haven't done anything on that section.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Okay. So I could write an email to Robin, Ben, and Daniel to kind of
Getting
get
started.
this going and
Yeah.
and write a bit about now what do I think that should be in this section. I mean, what I just said before about the characteristics of the pathogens and infection, but you maybe also have other ideas. Yeah, then you can see what you make from it. Would that be a solution? And you can concentrate
okay.
just on, if you formulate one or two challenges, just write about that. You don't immediately have to be, let's say, writing about all those points that are in the outline.
Right, and then contact him, and then yeah, try to merge ideas, right?
Yeah.
There's also
Oh, yeah,
these challenges here on parameter estimation and model fitting, right? Ben is doing this, right?
Yeah, but I'm happy if you've got any extra comments or suggestions, then you're very welcome to.
Yeah, there
add
may
those
be
in.
also a lot of links between these two sections, or
Yeah, definitely.
it's not always clear what should be in which one. So you can also shift around.
Yeah,
Daniel, I don't have your email address. Can you somehow maybe
let me
put it
write
in the
here
chat?
in the chat.
It should be in Slack. Miriam.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
if
I
you want
must
it now,
say-
he should give it to you now. But just to remind people that I'm just trying to do a bit of checking up on the list.
Yeah.
So we've had
must
some
say
people added to very.
I'm not very active on Slack.
We're not using Slack for very much, but it's I'm trying to make sure that the people who are involved in each challenge paper, that you can find a list of them in the Slack channel.
Mhm.
So it's an easy, sort of reasonably easy lookup for that.
Yeah.
So you need to remember that in Slack they list people in order of their first name, and sometimes people have a first name like Mail because their email address is so in other words, it's not their real name, but fortunately there are not too many of those. You can and if you click on them, you'll find their proper details. No, in general, I find Slack a bit disappointing. I'm sure there's all sorts of more things we could do with it. It's sometimes funny, sometimes for a sort of online discussion, it's a little bit easier than email sometimes if you have a topic and a number of people who want to chip in on it. But
yeah, okay, that's the advantage, that you see what others are writing without opening a mail.
Yeah, it's good if you want to make a sort of conversational remark which is really aimed at one or two people, but you don't mind everyone, you quite like everyone in the group to be able to see it.
I found it really useful for kind of sharing resources, because I might feel like I'm bothering someone to email them a paper, but if I put a paper on a Slack channel.
Yeah, and exactly, and popping documents we're talking about in Slack is it's quite good. Anyway,
the same sort of relationship as text messages and phone calls, or emails and phone calls. People used to say that, email was better than phoning somebody because you didn't interrupt them. It was just there and they could look when they were ready. And I guess it's the same sort of thing, but a bit further down the line too.
Yeah.
Time has gone on.
Okay, I think then we are done for today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Miriam.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye all.
Enjoy your weekend.
You too.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Did we finish, Dennis? Oh, Dennis is gone. Okay, we did finish. Bye, Daniel.
Bye.
Bye-bye.